Internet, hello you lovelies. Let's talk about The Bear Season 3, Part 3, diving into episodes 7 through 10. If you want to check out Part 1 with 1 through 3, Part 2's right here with 4 through 6, we're going to be diving into the end of the season. Please do hit that subscription bell if you're new to this page. I cover movies, news and reviews, comic news and reviews, and sometimes TV. If you want to see more TV stuff, let me know in the comments below, and like this video so I know it is something you like, because I want to keep going in this journey, and I appreciate each and every one of you that has subscribed. Without further ado, let's dive into The Bear Season 3. Now, Season 3 has been a really interesting journey for me because I have enjoyed it more than I think most people have, but I seem to have enjoyed it slightly less than the critic score on Rotten Tomatoes. Now, Rotten Tomatoes is an aggregate of scores. 94% or whatever is out doesn't mean the show is 94% good. It means that 94% of however many critics thought it was a passing score. And I totally agree that this is still an incredible show, and I'll talk about at the end of this video how I think it ranks with seasons 1, 2, and 3, but it seems like everyone on Twitter and everyone in the conversations, at least what's coming across my feed, didn't like The Bear Season 3. I have had a great time with this show. I think even my favorite episodes are different than a lot of people's experience with it, so I'd love to hear in the comments which your favorite episodes are, because I really found a lot of the moments unique in this fourth section, this end act, these last 4 episodes. And a lot of people thought episode 7, which we're about to dive into, was a filler episode. And I don't think so. For me, episode 7, episode 8 were the two that kind of mirrored the overall theme of the season. Each episode, and especially each pair of episodes, for me, felt like it had a very core theme. But I think the overall theme I was experiencing in season 3 was legacy. And I think the episode that signifies that most is episode 7. This episode is called Legacy. It deals with a family tree element. It deals with what it means to leave a legacy within a restaurant. It means what it means to get to that point in your legacy that inspires how you run a restaurant or how you cook or what formed you in that space. And the butterfly effect concept has always fascinated me. The idea that every single thing we do impacts the next. And I feel like The Bear really addresses that well. The first episode was all about that butterfly effect. And every time there's a flashback, you get this inclination of how the past has informed any number of characters. I loved that napkins episode because all of those details 3 years into knowing Tina were fascinating to know why her passion is so strong, why her drive is so strong, why she wants to be so good. And to see Carmy's legacy and to see what he's going through in wanting to have a legacy and still being so broken versus Marcus, who wants to have the legacy of being someone's emergency contact. To have aspirations is so interesting, especially in a world like this where what Carmy wants to do is so big and ambitious and impactful. And then to have Sydney want that Michelin star is driving him. And what he wants is this perfect, idealized situation. And Marcus is the only one that understands that. He has been through the rigors of like the Copenhagen school. He's the only one that when the non-negotiables were presented went, oh yeah, that makes sense. But that doesn't make him as broken as what Carmen's went through. What we see him go through as we get to the 10th episode, the Joel McHale stuff, the other restaurants, all those things broke him in a way that's affecting Sydney horribly. They show this duality between the ambition of just trying to live your life well and the happiness of Marcus. His mom dies, and he still talks about how positive it was to be at the restaurant. That's where his mom would have wanted him to be. He stops and smells the violets. He's someone that is able to live in the now, but still has that drive, versus Carmen, who is always upset and very broken because of the things that happened in his past. And I love the idea of tying that all into Sweetie's baby, making the legacy she's leaving behind, the conversation she had with Tina about being a good mother, the literal legacy of what you are in family and in your work family and who you are and how that's represented through the restaurant and also through Sweetie having the baby, which is where this episode goes, because not only does the end of the episode have the baby on the way in a very powerful statement and drive mirroring legacy in the opposite direction in episode 8, but also in Sydney being offered to start her own legacy. She's being offered to be number 2 at a restaurant and basically create a restaurant her way, but sacrificing everything that led to this point, leaving her work family, what that looks like for her. So this episode I thought was huge, and a lot of people kept saying 7 was filler, but I think the moment with Sydney is one of the biggest moments of the episode. I think the impact of legacy, I think the duality of Marcus and Carmen, and I also think, obviously, the beginning of the birth of Sweetie's child that's been set up since season 2, and that brings me to episode 8, and episode 8 it's incredible. I think it is incredibly powerful television. It's called Ice Chips, and it is almost entirely in a hospital room. It opens very intensely with a car scene that rivals most chase scenes. It is just paranoid and claustrophobic, and because of an earlier very flippant subtle line read of we got to put our phones in lockers, no one is available to answer her when she's having the baby except her mom, because of another subplot of her not reaching out to her mom. That's the last person she wants to call. And I love that we're set up since season 2 with this moment, and I love the relationship between mom and daughter being addressed in the most intense of circumstances. And I love that this episode, in the same way that episode 6, Napkins, mirrored forks, this to me mirrors 7 Fishes. This to me mirrors the Christmas episode, in that it's a bottle episode of intensity that still drives the plot along and still describes and enhances and deepens our characters. Here, Jamie Lee Curtis's character isn't just malevolent. In some ways, we've seen her in very aggressive ways. In other episodes, we've seen her motherly and maternal, but with a very intense edge and broken in her own way. And we see why her kids are the way they are. But this episode, we get under that hard shell in a new way. We see a softness. We see what led her to be who she is. We see a maternalness towards her daughter and the moments where she's calling her so beautiful. We dive into her legacy, but also we see legacy in another direction. In the last episode, it is basically legacy getting you to that point and what you want to leave behind. And in this episode, it's about the journey that got you there and forgiving it. It is leaving a better legacy than you inherited. It is letting things go and how important that is. And I love that the whole episode's about telling people you love them, which is so important. And the whole episode's about letting trauma actually drive you, but healing it through letting it go. And I really love that once again, the credit song is the theme, but I really love that Jamie Lee Curtis, who we've only seen in somewhat of an antagonistic way, is given this powerful moment where you don't know how she's going to react to certain beats. You don't know how tempestuous the reaction is going to be. And then when she opens up, there's so much warmth, and the performance here rivals, I think, 7 Fishes. Even though it's not as big, there's moments where it's big, but it is very beautifully contained. And it also is a beautiful moment for, I think his name's Petey, to use that character in a way where he's been simple and silly, but here that simple and silly isn't just comedic relief, it's actually what she needs. So this whole episode is tense until the relief of seeing her husband. And I love that he's been a comedic relief element a lot. But here it's, you know why Sweetie would want to marry someone like that, because you see the dichotomy between the world she's been raised in, the people she's around, the rest of her family, and then this guy who's the eye in the hurricane, this comfort. And I love that he's immediately comforting. His presence is so welcome. Even though we've seen a new side of Jamie Lee Curtis's character, seeing him is a breath of fresh air. And I just love that legacy is sometimes about going in the other direction and forgiveness and healing. And I think this was really beautiful as a pair. 7 and 8 I thought were wonderful. I really like this episode in particular as acting. It is so powerful, so well written, so well directed. And I love the ending with Petey and Sydney with the food and just that little bit of silliness, because now he's been endeared to us in a new way. Really powerful stuff. Really loved episode 8. One of my favorites of the season. I think for me, it is episode 1, episode 6, episode 8 as my 3 favorites of the season. And I'd rank those up against almost any episode in the show. They're up there with 7 Fishes. They're up there to me with the incredible Forks episode. Really good stuff. Let's talk about episode 9. To me, episode 9 is all about finding the right people at the right time. And I feel like that's where the show is going as we rush towards the conclusion of season 3, is whether or not Sydney is in the right place at the right time with the right people and the cost of that. And I really like the way they're setting things up, that basically Carmen came out of that fridge, New York Carmen again, and he didn't learn the right lesson from that experience. I think he is meant to be with Claire, and I think Claire is the only person that brings him peace in a very unique way. You never in life want to have a relationship where someone is your happiness and they're the only happiness you have. That's unhealthy all around. but I think that Carmen has to work through all of his other stuff and then meet Claire again at the right time. And I think that's the long game they're playing with season 4. But I really like that season 3 has this percolating idea of whether or not Sydney's going to leave the bear and whether or not that's for the best for her and whether or not the bear is for anyone's good, including Carmen. And I really like that this episode opens with magic and the idea that there might be like a magic trick that saves us and saves the bear. The sleight of hand concept is about you seeing something in front of you and something else happening over here, and then the sleight of hand of not making you realize until it's magic that this has been right in front of you the whole time. I think that's the desserts. I think the dialogue about the pastry chef being too expensive, about how much we love Marcus, about how much Marcus understands what Carmen's trying to do, about Marcus going to Copenhagen. He's the one that's done this journey, and I think he's going to have a magic dessert that's going to save the bear. And I think this episode is that seed being planted through that opening montage of all those incredible directors, their sleight of hand concepts, and Marcus being the one that really is trying to do what Carmen is trying to make happen. And the two of them, hopefully with Carmen getting some mental health in order in season 4 after whatever fallout is going to happen in this finale, allowing season 4 to make the bear what they've all dreamt it up to be. This episode also deals with the idea of everyone growing kind of around Carmen. Carmen hasn't evolved as much this season as he's needed to. Everyone else has had these great arcs, and I think that's intentional, but I think that's why some people haven't liked this season is with a movie like Across the Spider-Verse, I loved that it had a cliffhanger because it still had arcs for everyone. A lot of people didn't like the ending of Across the Spider-Verse because they felt like it was only one half of a movie. I disagree. I think Spider-Gwen had a full arc. I think Miles Morales had a full arc. I think those characters had a movie arc, but the overall Spider-Verse story is still an overarching arc that's going to continue into the third. This show, I do find the lead in Carmen did not have the arc I think he needed to for the season to feel like a complete season, which is why it's a little lower. We're going to talk about that at the end. But I do think the other characters had enough of arcs that I felt their stories had that needed closure by the time we get to the end of season 3. And I think what's interesting is everyone's growing around Carmen, our lead. And Tina, we see her grow through her episode. Sydney, practically done with Carmen, and in some ways has changed her cooking style in ways that no one else is noticing. There was that line about like, oh, this is good for 2014, and also giving new ideas, creating, being recognized by lots of other people, not within the bear. And I really think that's going to be a moment for her to either have a competing restaurant or have the Breaking Bad ending where it's like the lead guy isn't able to fix his stuff and remains broken, but his apprentice is able to escape and flourish. So Jesse Pinkman survives, spoilers for Breaking Bad from 10 years ago, but Jesse Pinkman surviving and escaping while Walter White is forever broken. I could see the bear ending that way where, you know, all of Carmen's struggles he's got too much baggage and he's not able to escape, but Sydney can, maybe in this new restaurant, or they become competing restaurants, would be very interesting. But I do think with Claire, we have the opportunity for Carmen to grow, and I really am curious if that has anything to do with the magic concept introduced in this episode. And there's also a detail with this funeral card that Carmen looks at right before he goes to the funeral for the other restaurant, Olivia Colman's restaurant, and I'm wondering if that symbolizes the end of the bear restaurant. Is that a funeral card for the bear? Is it just the other restaurant? Is it something he got from the funeral we saw earlier in the season? Very curious which thing that particular imagery represents as we end episode 9, going into episode 10. Episode 10, the finale of season 3 of The Bear. This episode is so interesting because it is the culmination of where we've come from the show from season 1. It is about passing on trauma. It's about growing a little bit better in finding the benefits in trauma and letting that turn you into a better person, learning from things. It is all about being a little better every day. I talk all the time about compound interest, and I don't just mean money. I think it's insane how instead of trying to be like 20% better at something in a week, try to be 1% better at something every day. And it's insane where you are in a month. It's really crazy where you are in a year, but it's astronomical where you are in 5 years. And it's so much easier to be consistent being 1% better at something than it is at being 20% better in a certain amount of time. Chipping away at things, compound interest will change the game. And this episode starts to tease that concept. And if you look at what a chef has to do, the 10,000 hours of shucking, the time of like making peas and the time of like whittling down, that consistency that grows your skill set over time is what makes you a master. And I'm really curious how that pays off in season 4, because those ideas are presented here, but we also see that starting to break Sydney. there's a really beautiful 1-2 punch of Sydney getting her new apartment and then feeling like she's found a family, having the after party at her place, which is brand new, but then her having that breakdown right after. She doesn't know whether she can leave her family, her work family. She doesn't know whether it's the right decision to leave this abusive situation between her and Carmy. She doesn't know if it's better for her to start over because she's worked so hard and she's changed this place in so many ways. But also, with that funeral card I mentioned, is it better for everyone if the bear ends? Is it better if we don't have those magic days there anymore? That flashback scene with John Bernthal talking about how everyone's always yelling, how intense it is, but those magic days. We had very few magic days this season. Is it better for Carmen not to work at the Bear? Is it better for all of them to be at other restaurants? Is it better for Sydney to not be there? And I think it's really interesting because if the show ends that way, it's going to be such a bittersweet, dark ending, but it could be the answer because restaurants close all the time. Restaurants are a hard industry. And we've seen that teased with Oliver Platt's character. We saw a brief flash of the review, but it was like, you know, staccato, all different, all over the place, reactions, good and bad. And I think that's what the review is going to be, is that the restaurant's a little all over the place because they change the menu all the time. So Carmen's going to have to narrow it down, and the review's going to have to, you know, make him realize this is too much. But there's also a bunch of texts from Computer. By the way, in the comments, someone told me on my part 2 video that the actor who plays Computer is the guy who wrote Rounders. I love Rounders. I love that fun fact. If you have any more fun facts about the Bear, leave them in the comments below, because that was amazing. I had no idea of that. Fun fact for me, Maddie Madison, who plays the main fact that we met season 1, is the only actual chef. He's a 5-star chef. Like, he's an incredible chef on the show. He's the only chef, and he's the only one you don't see ever cooking. And I think that's really fun that they cast a chef to be an actor, but didn't let him cook. And they've made all these actors learn to cook. It's really fun, just the dynamic of which people do what role. And I think it's really fun for him to play the non-chef as a chef in reality. But this last episode I thought was really special. I like that it ended dark. I'm really curious how magic comes into play in season 4. I'm really curious how Sydney's relationship with the family of the Bear comes into play. I'm really curious if Carmen gets better with this realization of the review. I'm really curious what the review says. There's a lot on the table going into season 4. I'm very curious, and I also am very curious what you guys thought of season 3. Again, let me know in the comments below. I would rank this one, for me, season 2 of The Bear is the best season because it escalated all the stakes, it dove deeper into character sets, and it elevated the directing and the writing. I said from the beginning, season 1, when I watched it, I was well aware this is one of the best new shows on TV as it was airing. Season 2, I was well aware if it stuck the landing, which it did, this is one of the best modern TV shows of all time. And I said at the beginning of these reviews, if season 3 sticks the landing, this is one of the greatest shows of all time. I don't think this season was bad, but I do think season 1 and 2 were A+. This is like an A-. They were 5-star seasons. This one is still a 4.5 star. Still better than 95% of what's on TV, but I think it needs season 4 to really know if it's one of the best shows of all time. I do feel like I need to know what's on the other side of this arc before I can make that distinction, and I do think because of those elements, it does feel more like a part 1 of 2 than I was expecting, and without that, I can't really say it's higher than season 1 or 2 because they felt complete in their anxiety and their tension. So this is my 3rd favorite of the 3 so far, but I'm curious if season 4 elevates this one as well, if we know where those starts pay off. When the seeds get planted and turn into flowers, I'm very curious what those violets look like. That is going to do it for this review. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for being here. Hit that like if you liked this video. Leave a comment. Let me know what your favorite season is, what your favorite episode is. If you got any fun facts, leave comments. I want to have conversations about the Bear. I'm going to miss this show. I hate binge shows because shows should come out weekly. We should have had 10 weeks to discuss this show. Instead, we had days. So leave a comment below, and also please hit that subscription bell. I want to keep growing this page, and I appreciate each and every one of you that has subscribed. It is it feels amazing that there are almost 27,000 of you that are listening to the ideas I have and my experiences with art. That means the world, so I really appreciate every one of you that's done that, and every one of you that's going to continue to do that through this video. Fucking thank you. I'll see you soon.